Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Wednesday? Yosef in New Jersey, Yehud in South Carolina, Sharon in New Jersey, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Paul in the Great Northwest, Shandora in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Nancy in North Carolina, Stephen in New Hampshire, Guy in Ohio. Tom wishing everyone a freilich mitvach, a happy Wednesday. In Pennsylvania, Jonathan in Southern California, Lucy in Minnesota, Gail, I'm so glad you're here, from Kansas City, Karen in Berkeley, Renee in Indiana, Marjorie in Georgia, Mickey in New Jersey, Bito in desde Panama, Chaim in Florida, Spencer in Chile, Connecticut, Alan in New York City, Marie in Freeport, and Mike in Texas. Our class today is this episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our very own Gail Har in honor of the bat mitzvah of Abigail Har. Abigail was converted as an infant, as her mother was not Jewish. In the past 13 years, her mother converted, and Abigail has become active both in her synagogue and in Jewish life at home. I am so proud of her and her family. Beautiful dedication. May Abigail, grow to a beautiful life of Torah and chuppah and masim tovim, right? A life of Torah and the Jewish marriage and good deeds. May she have good health and great joy to 120. And Gail, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. We all say Amen. Okay. All right, finishing volume 1 as it's laid out in the Koren Talmud. I believe the Art Scroll does Sanhedrin in 3 volumes. But for Koren, the break is here between chapters 6 and 7, which we're, God willing, going to complete chapter 6 and open chapter 7 today. Our daf is page 49 here in Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud. We picked this up right at the top of 49a, continuing our discussion that we opened yesterday of the tale of King Solomon and Yoav. Yoav was a very faithful general to Solomon's father, David, King David, but Yoav exceeded his authority and thought he knew better than David. David was pursued, hotly pursued, and almost killed a few times by King Saul. When Saul was still king, and felt very jealous and threatened by David, though David was absolutely loyal. It was really misplaced paranoia on the part of Saul. And eventually, Saul, for his own misdeeds, the throne was taken away from him by God and given to David. Now, in that succession crisis, when it was given to David, this fellow Avner, who was a loyal subject of Saul, thought that Saul's son should receive the crown, not some other guy that wasn't the son of the previous king. And so Avner, being loyal to Saul, tried to support his son in receiving the throne. David won that battle. And then, but there was, it was near civil war. It was very contentious in the nation. And Avner saw that it was better for the land of Israel that David be king over a land at peace and united than what his own views held about who the king should be. And so he went to David and said, okay, you're right. I support you and I will help you unify the land. So even though Avner had been an enemy of David, when he was helping Saul pursue David, now that he wanted to make peace, David was all too happy to let bygones be bygones and work with Avner to make this peace. Only problem was Yoav, right? So Yoav was very loyal to David and thought that David was wrong to, make it up and work with Avner. Yoav believed that Avner was being treacherous and was just trying to get close to David for his own ulterior reasons. But Yoav's judgment was also skewed by the fact that while they were enemies, right, David and Yoav versus Saul and Avner, while they were still in a state of enmity, Avner had killed Yoav's brother. Right? So Yoav saying, yeah, Avner, you don't really mean it. You don't want to make peace with David. You're just really trying to pull a number on David. Yoav's own judgment was biased because he hated Avner because Avner had killed his brother, which we'll be discussing today. And so Yoav killed Avner. David was very angry about that, extremely so, and cursed Yoav. Didn't kill him, even though he had killed somebody that was so important to David and this reconciliation and getting the nation unified again, but he cursed Yoav. And as we learned yesterday, Yoav from then on, was an enemy, let's say, of David and David's plans. He was sort of outside the succession. He was no longer one of the ministers of the king. But many years later, when David grew old, and there was a succession crisis after David, where David's sons, first Absalom and then Adonijah, tried to take the throne from David before he had died, and because they knew that David wanted Solomon to succeed him, and Yoav supported Adonijah in that effort. And so when Solomon became king and he needed to consolidate power, he sent for Yoav to kill him, because he had led this sedition against Solomon in favor of Adonijah. And so we picked it up yesterday. Yoav had run to where the tabernacle was and was grasping the altar, the horns of the altar where sacrifices were brought on behalf of the Jewish people, thinking that, while he was holding that, they weren't going to take him out and kill him. Solomon's servant Benaiah indeed paused, like, I guess maybe I can't kill him if he's holding on to the altar. He went back to Solomon. Solomon said, yeah, you can kill him. Yoav tried to talk his way out of it, although it's not mentioned explicitly in the Torah, by saying, your father, David, cursed me. If you now kill me, Solomon, I won't live to experience all the curses that your father placed on me and my descendants. Rather, those curses will pass to you. And Solomon said, yeah, I don't buy that, and had him killed. So Yoav was killed. And indeed, Solomon's descendants did suffer some of those curses. Okay, that's where we were yesterday. Now, 49a, we continue this discussion of Yoav. So they brought Yoav before Solomon, right? Before he was executed. And Solomon judged him. And Solomon said to Yoav, what is the reason that you killed Avner? Right? Yoav killed Avner because he claimed that it was for David's benefit because Avner was treacherous. But in fact, it's because he hated Avner because Avner killed Yoav's brother. So now Solomon is saying to Yoav face to face, what is the reason that you killed Avner? And Yoav said to him, I was the blood redeemer of the blood of Asahel. So he's not even claiming that he did it as he does, over there in the Bible. Here he's admitting, no, I did it because I was obligated to kill him because he killed my brother, right? The redeemer of blood is the closest relative to one who was killed. So he says, I was the blood redeemer, right? The closest relative charged with redeeming the blood, getting vengeance of the blood of Asahel. When Avner murdered my brother Asahel, I killed him in fulfillment of my duty as his blood redeemer. Solomon said to him, when Avner killed Asahel, the reason was that Asahel was pursuing Avner with the intention of killing him. And therefore, he had the status of a pursuer. It's not like Avner just rose up and killed Asahel out of nowhere because he didn't like the cut of his jeans, right? Asahel was trying to kill Avner when Avner killed Asahel. Avner killed Asahel in self-defense. And since Avner killed Asahel in an act of self-defense, you had no right to kill him as a redeemer of Asahel's blood. There's no such thing as the Goel Hadam, the blood redeemer, in the case of self-defense. The Goel Hadam is mentioned in the Torah specifically in the case of the manslaughterer, right? When somebody commits a negligent homicide, then the closest relative has a right to kill him, until he reaches the city of refuge. We can also say that the blood redeemer has a role to play in the case of an intentional murder, right? Where the blood redeemer does get involved to the extent that after the trial, he can act as the executioner. He can act as the executioner, personally, actually redeem the blood by acting as the executioner, though he can't do it without a trial. In the case of the manslaughterer, he can. That's quite counterintuitive, but we'll save that for another day. Okay, but if it was a case of self-defense, no, then you're not the redeemer of blood, right? Avner killed Asahel in self-defense, so you had no right to then rise up and kill Avner. Yoav said to Solomon, Avner could have saved himself by wounding Asahel in one of his limbs. And having failed to do so, he was guilty of murder, and I was therefore entitled to kill him. Right. So, as a member of Magen Am, an organization where I've shared with you in previous times that we are licensed to carry firearms in synagogue in case, God forbid, it should ever happen. Somebody with Jew hatred in his eyes came in and tried to, murder Jews, then we would, please God, shoot him first in self-defense or defense of, our community, and put down this, evil, murdering psychopath who would come to try and kill us. So if, God forbid, I ever have to kill somebody who's coming to kill me or my family, right? Yeah, I'm aiming to kill. I'm not going to aim to shoot him in the leg, right? And that is Avner's argument, right? Yoav's argument. He's saying, well, maybe my brother was coming to kill Avner, but Avner could have just, wounded him rather than killed him. Terrible argument. Right, and there's a lot of people who are for good reasons, they have good hearts and would like to see fewer killings in the United States and around the world, and that's what their agenda is. But they don't really live in the real world, okay, where they say, yeah, somebody's trying to kill you, you should shoot him in the leg. So yeah, in the heat of the moment, when somebody's trying to kill you, it is not feasible to order the person to, shoot him in the leg, or else it won't be an act of self-defense, rather than it becomes some kind of homicide, because he had the option of wounding the onrushing killer and instead killed him. Terrible argument. You might, and some people will say, well, maybe if he's coming with a gun, you don't shoot him you can't be expected to shoot him in the leg. But if he's coming at you with a knife, maybe you should be able to shoot him in the leg, or obligated to shoot him in the leg. I'm telling you, that's a ridiculous argument. And people should know, it's amazing the case studies of it. Somebody who's coming at you with a knife and he's running at you, you really have seconds, if you needed to draw your weapon and fire before he would reach you and stab you, perhaps lethally. So if you're really defending yourself from a lethal attack, whether it's with a gun or not, so you're going to aim to kill. That is legal and that is correct. Let us move on. Solomon said to him, Avner was not able to injure Asahel because he was running and could not aim with precision. The wisdom of Solomon. Obviously, you can't expect somebody who's under attack to somehow exercise this precise self-defense that it will only wound the attacker and not kill him. I mean, it'd be nice if you could do that. Maybe some people are so well trained that they could execute that. But you can't expect that from somebody who is running for his life and he's trying to defend himself and he's going to, wound and not kill. And Solomon says it, the wisest person who ever lived. Yoav said to Solomon, what are you talking about? Now that Avner was able to aim and hit him precisely in the fifth rib, as it is written, and Avner smote him with the butt end of the spear in the Chomesh. 2 Samuel 2:23. Rabbi Yochanan says that this means that he hit him in the fifth rib, the place where the gallbladder and liver hang. So Yoav is saying if Avner could aim with precision at the fifth rib, could he not have successfully aimed at one of Asahel's limbs? I don't buy this at all. That might just be where he happened to hit him. Was he aiming for that exact spot, or that's just where the butt end of the spear ended up, creating the wound? Solomon said to Yoav, all right, set aside the case of Avner. I have further problems with you, Yoav. Even if you could make that argument and prevail, what is the reason that you killed Amasa? And Avner said to him, I killed Amasa in punishment for his having rebelled against the king. As it is written, quote, and the king said to Amasa, muster to me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be you here present. And Amasa went to call the men of Judah, but he was later than the set time that he, meaning King David, had assigned to him. Right? So Amasa was late. David said to his servant Amasa, go gather a bunch of people and you come with them. And he gathered the people, but he wasn't with them. He was late. So according to Yoav, late, subject to the death penalty. If a king tells you to be somewhere at a certain time and you don't come, subject to the death penalty, according to Yoav. Solomon said to him, Amasa was not guilty of rebelling against the king just because he was late, because he interpreted the words ach and rak in a restrictive manner. And in that way, he limited the king's authority. Meaning, a king could give you an order, but not every order is equal. There are some orders that we don't have to follow so explicitly, even if they're given by a Jewish king. Right? It is the law, Torah law, that you have to follow the instructions of a Jewish king. But not all orders are the same. How so? Amasa found the men of Judah starting to study a new tractate. They were engaged in Torah study. So he said to himself, it is written, any man who rebels against your commandment and will not listen to your words in all that you command him, he shall be put to death. Right? It is a death penalty offense if you don't listen to the orders of a king. That's from Joshua 1:18. Based on these words alone, one might have thought that the king must be obeyed, even when that would lead to abstention from the study of words of Torah. Therefore, the same verse states, only, the word rock, only, be strong and of a good courage. Only. What does it mean, only? It means but in this situation. Right? The word rock is a restrictive term that serves to limit the king's authority in a situation where obeying his command will minimize the study of Torah. Consequently, Amasa was justified when he did not muster the men of Judah at the appointed time, and therefore you, Yoav, have no right to kill him. And by the way, since Solomon is now the king, and Yoav didn't come when he was summoned, Solomon has the right to kill him according to Yoav's argument, but no one's making that argument. Solomon continued, rather the opposite is true. That man, meaning you, a euphemism for you, now that I'm sentencing you to die, Yoav rebelled against the king. As it is written, quote, then tidings came to Yoav, for Yoav had followed after Adonijah, though he had not followed after Avshalom, right? Two sons rose up against their father, King David. And Yoav fled to the tent of the Lord and caught hold of the horns of the altar. And Yoav followed Adonijah, thereby rebelling against Solomon, the lawful king. And that's why Solomon had him killed. The Gemara asks, what does the verse mean to teach when it says that Yoav did not follow Avshalom? And Rav Yehuda says it serves to teach that Yoav wanted to follow Avshalom, but in practice, he did not follow him. And the Gemara asks, if he wanted to do so, what is the reason that he did not follow Avshalom? Hold on a second. I just want to check something here. Yeah. I don't like saying Avshalom. I'm just going to go with Avshalom. Okay. So what is the reason that Yoav did not follow Avshalom? So Rav Yehuda says it serves to teach that Yoav wanted to follow Avshalom, but in practice, he did not follow him. So the Gemara asks, if he wanted to do so, what is the reason that Yoav did not follow Avshalom? And Rabbi Elazar says, when Avshalom rebelled against his father, David was still in possession of his vitality, meaning he was still strong, and Yoav feared him. Right? Yoav wasn't loyal to David, he was scared of David. Later, when David was very old and weakened, both himself personally, physically, but also his military power was weakened because he wasn't, personally taking charge of having kind of elite stormtroops always ready to defend his position. He was weakened, and now Yoav felt that he could side with the next usurper, which was David's son Adonijah. Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, David's stars, meaning the planetary influences that determined his fortune, his mazel, still stood for him. As Rav Yehuda says, that Rav says, David had 400 children in his army, and all of them were sons of beautiful women taken captive from their Gentile homes during war. And they grew their hair in a Gentile hairstyle, and they would go at the head of the troops. And they were the strong arm enforcers of the house of David, the elite stormtroopers, on whose loyalty David's monarchy relied. And as long as David was supported by this force, Yoav was afraid to challenge him. And the Gemara notes, and those who view Yoav in a negative light disagree with the opinion of Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana. As Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, were it not for David, who studied Torah, Yoav would not have been able to wage war successfully. And were it not for the military acumen of Yoav, David would not have been able to study Torah. As it is written, and David executed judgment and justice to all his people, and Yoav, the son of Uriah, was over the army. 2 Samuel 8, verses 15 and 16. And what is the reason that David executed judgment and justice to all his people? He was able to do so because Yoav, the son of Zeruiah, was over the army, assisting him in fighting his battles. And what is the reason that Yoav, the son of Zeruiah, was over the army? He was able to do so because David executed judgment and justice to all his people. This is a beautiful portrayal, an illustration, depiction of the necessary partnership between the Torah scholars and the soldiers, right? In fact, the founder of our organization, Maganam, Rabbi Yossi Elfert, was just talking at an event that we had Saturday night about how it's just so sad that there's this big conflict in Israel that's difficult to reconcile. Because there are some people who just need to be studying, and the ones who are studying rather than going in the army, it's not a boondoggle, right? They're living in, most of them in poverty, and studying 18 hours a day. And Israel, the nation of Israel, not just the land of Israel, but all of us, Am Yisrael, around the world, need there to be a sort of, the Navy SEALs of Torah study. Right? We need to have the stormtroopers of Torah study, a core of dedicated scholars who are always toiling in Torah study, because that keeps all of us safe. And the Torah scholars need to have the actual soldiers who are out there fighting the battles. And of course, that's a very large group. And when we're at war, it gets even larger. But both sides need each other. There's no conflict between them. It's a partnership, and a crucial partnership, and a partnership that has always existed in Am Yisrael. And may we all support each other and appreciate each other and fulfill our roles and stand our post with courage and strength. Okay. Right, so David was able to judge the people, and he had to be a Torah scholar and able to do that because he had Yoav out there fighting the battles, and Yoav was able to be out there fighting the battles because David was judging the people with justice and, definitely sort of being a patron of tremendous amounts of Torah study going on in David's time. Not just David was learning Torah. There were many scholars learning Torah. Okay, new topic. The verse states, and Yoav went out from David and sent messengers after Avner, and they brought him back from Sira. So this is back, when David was young and had just become king, and this is where Avner came to him, said, I want to make peace with you. Yoav didn't believe it, was biased, and ends up killing Avner. It's that incident. Right, and so Yoav went out from David and sent messengers after Avner, and they brought him back from Sira. 2 Samuel 3:26. So the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the name Sira? So Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, a bore, that's a well, and a thorn, the sira, caused Avner to be killed. Right? Avner was trying to make peace, and he had, killed justifiably Yoav's brother, and that's what directly led to him being killed. But it's not like he was free of sin. He did have a past. Remember that he was absolutely an enemy of David, and that's what Yoav claimed at the time was the reason to kill Avner. So when he was David's enemy, he had done a lot of harm. And what was that? Avner became liable to be killed when he failed to take advantage of two opportunities to bring about a reconciliation between King Saul and David. First, when David cut off a corner of Saul's robe after he entered a cave in order to relieve himself. And second, when David found Saul sleeping and took the jug of water and the spear from next to his head. In other words, these were two incidents when David was on the run from King Saul, who was trying to kill David. So if somebody's come, this would be the argument that, it is possible not to kill the one who's pursuing you, right? Saul definitely wanted David dead. David had the opportunity to kill Saul, not once, but twice. Could have easily done it, was right next to him when he was unguarded. David did not kill him. And David let him know, I was next to you, and I could have killed you, and I didn't. And that's why he cut off the corner of his robe as a sign, and why he took this jug of water and spear. Twice he could have killed Saul and didn't. Why didn't he kill Saul? Because David was a pious Jew who wasn't going to kill the king of Israel. That's why. He really was loyal to Saul. Saul was just, not a good king. Just consumed by paranoia, and ultimately it was his destruction. Avner became liable to be killed when he failed to take advantage of these two opportunities to bring about a reconciliation between King Saul and David. First, when David cut off the corner of Saul's robe and after he entered the cave, and second, when David found Saul sleeping and took the jug of water and spear from next to his head. So rather than tell Saul that David could have killed him and refrained from doing so, Avner suggested to Saul that his robe may have been torn by a thorn bush, and that his jug of water may have been taken by one of his own men. And these two incidents are alluded to by the words bore, well, and jug of water, or the jug of water, and sira, a thorn bush, in both of these incidents. Right? In other words, Avner, the sages are saying that Avner was guilty and merited death because he had an opportunity to create peace among factions in Israel and didn't do it. He knew that he had that role. He should have realized it was the better thing to do, but he wanted to keep waging that war at Saul's side and with David. Maybe he thought that if they made a peace, it would not be personally advantageous for him. At any rate, he had a chance to make peace and he didn't do it, and that made him liable to the death penalty, according to this analysis. The verse states, and Yoav took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly. Right? This is when Yoav finds Avner. So Rabbi Yochanan says, those were Avner's sins. So Rabbi Yochanan says that Yoav judged Avner according to the law of the Sanhedrin, which would sit in judgment by the gate of the city. How so? Yoav said to Avner, what is the reason that you killed Asahel? And Avner said to him, Asahel was pursuing me with the intention to kill me, and therefore he had the status of a pursuer, whom I had the right to kill in self-defense. And Yoav said to Avner, even so, you could have saved yourself by wounding one of his limbs. And Avner said, I was not able to do that, as I was running and could not aim with precision. And Yoav said, now seeing that you were able to aim and hit him precisely in the fifth rib, could you not have successfully aimed at one of his limbs? And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of to speak with him quietly? Right? When Yoav brought over Avner and ended up killing him, he started by speaking to him quietly. So Rav Yehuda says that Rav says he took him aside to speak to him by way of deception. He took him aside to speak to him by way of deception. As for what is stated, and Avner smote him with the butt end of the spear in the Chomesh, right, that Avner had done to Yoav's brother, Rabbi Yochanan says he hit him in the fifth rib, the place where the gallbladder and the liver hang. The verse states that Solomon said to Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, concerning Yoav, and the Lord shall return the blood upon his own head, for he fell upon two men more righteous and better than he. Right? Solomon telling someone else another reason why Yoav deserved to die. And the Gemara explains that Amasa and Avner, both of whom Yoav killed, were better than Yoav, as they interpreted the words ach and rak in a restrictive manner that limited the king's authority, while he did not interpret them in that way, demonstrating that they were greater than him in Torah. Amasa and Avner were also more righteous than Yoav, as they both received oral instructions directly from Saul to slay the priests of Nov, and they did not do so. Whereas Yoav was instructed by David in a letter to kill Uriah, and he did not do so. I'm sorry, David is instructed by David in a letter to kill Uriah, and he did so. That was the incident of Bathsheba, for which David was faulted. Some sages make arguments that David was justified in doing that, but here it's being given over that David was wrong to want the death of Bathsheba's husband, right, by sending him to the front, and it was Yoav who carried out that order so that David could have Bathsheba. David was scolded, rebuked for that by the prophet Nathan. And so Yoav, for his role in that, is considered not righteous. And the verse states, but Amasa took no heed of the sword in Yoav's hand, 2 Samuel 20, verse 10. And Rav says Amasa took no heed of the sword because he did not suspect that Yoav was capable of murdering him. And the verse states, with regard to Yoav, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness, 1 Kings 2:34. And the Gemara asks, is that to say that Yoav's house was a wilderness? And Rav Yehuda says that Rav says Yoav's house was like the wilderness. Just as the wilderness is freely open to all, so too Yoav's house was freely open to all, as he generously opened his house to the poor and made them feel like members of the household. Ultimately, Yoav was caught up, taking sides in political battles. And in the end, he was executed by King Solomon because of that. But the final word of this chapter, the final word of this about Yoav in this story, is eulogizing him and saying that, well, these were the righteous deeds of Yoav. Alternatively, Yoav's house was like the wilderness, just as the wilderness is clean of theft and sexual immorality because it is uninhabited. So too, Yoav's house was clean of theft and sexual immorality, owing to his righteousness. As for the verse, and Yoav kept alive the rest of the city, 1 Chronicles 11:8, Rav Yehuda says, not only would Yoav feed the poor, but he would even give them treats of types of small fish so that they would lack nothing. And that concludes our discussion of chapter 6 here in Tractate Sanhedrin. And we move over to chapter 7 on page 49b. Mishna number 1 of chapter 7. 4 types of the death penalty were given over to the court, with which those who committed certain transgressions are executed. And they are in descending order of severity: stoning, burning, killing by decapitation, and strangulation. Rabbi Shimon says they are in descending order of severity: burning, stoning. Right? He switches the first two, whereas the majority say that stoning is the most severe penalty, therefore the most severe crimes. And burning is second. Rabbi Shimon says burning is the most severe and stoning is second. But all agree that strangulation... And he also says, and then third is strangulation and fourth is killing. Whereas the rabbis said that killing by decapitation was third and strangulation was fourth. Right? So Rabbi Shimon and the majority disagree on both pairs, as it were. And this execution that we just described in the previous chapter is referring to the mitzvah of those who are stoned, i.e. to the process of execution by stoning. That's what we've been talking about. Now we're going to compare stoning to these other forms of court-ordered execution. That's Mishnah number 1. Now, the Gemara. Rava says that Rav Sachora says that Rav Huna says, wherever the sages taught a halacha, a law, by means of a list, there is no significance to the order of their list, except for in the Mishnah that discusses the 7 abrasive substances where the order is significant. What are the 7 abrasive substances? As we learned in a Mishnah in Tractate Nida, 1 applies 7 abrasive substances to the stain found on a woman's clothing in order to find out whether the stain is from regular blood, in which case, she has no status change, or if it's menstrual blood, which would render her a nida, and therefore tameh, and prohibited to her husband until her flow stops and she immerses in the mikvah. So when a woman sees some spotting, and she needs to know, was that menstrual blood or regular blood? You would go to a rabbi who's extremely expert in these extremely nuanced shades of blood, of the color of blood. But he has another tool at his disposal, not just his eye. There are these abrasive substances that can be applied to the stain to see which one will change it, and they have to be done in order, or the test has accomplished nothing. right? One applies 7 abrasive substances to the stain, and in order to determine whether it is menstrual blood and therefore she is tameh, or whether it is some other type of stain and therefore she is tahor, ritually pure. And these substances are bland spittle, which is the spittle of someone who has not yet tasted anything in the morning. Moisture of grits, which is the spittle of one who has chewed the grits of beans. Urine, so that's 3. Natron, lye, Chemolian earth, and potash. I'm sure I'm pronouncing potash or potash. That's a word I've seen written. I've never heard spoken. Someone will let me know how to pronounce that properly. If the stain disappears as a result of the application of all of these substances, the stain is considered to have been from blood. And it is taught in the latter clause of that Mishnah that the order of the substances is essential. As it states, if one applied them not in the order prescribed for them, or applied all 7 of them at once, he has done nothing. The laundering is not effective as a test. Rav Papa, the elder, says in the name of Rav, the 4 types of death penalty are also taught in order. And this is apparent from the fact that Rabbi Shimon disagrees with the order. Conclude from it that it is taught in an exact order. And the Gemara adds, and the other sage, Rav Huna, does not include this Mishnah among those in which the order is significant, as he is not speaking of Mishnayos where there is a dispute with regard to the correct order. Right? Rav Huna would say, well, obviously, if they're arguing about the order is important. I'm saying that if they're not arguing about the order, then the order doesn't matter, except in the case of the 7 kinds of abrasive substances used to determine if blood is menstrual blood or not. Rav Papa says there's some other cases where the order matters. The order of the service in the temple on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, is also taught in its proper order. As we learned in a Mishnah, in Tractate Yoma, page 60a, with regard to all actions performed in the context of the service of Yom Kippur, which are stated in the Mishnah as in the Torah in order, the law is, if the high priest performed one action before another, i.e. if he diverged from the order that is written, it is as though he has done nothing. And the other sage, Rav Huna, does not include this Mishnah because that is merely a stringency, meaning, although a change in the order invalidates the Yom Kippur service, this is not due to the importance that some rites have relative to others, but rather because this order was explicitly delineated by the Torah. The Torah says that the high priest on the day of Yom Kippur, when the temple is standing, has to do this and then 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 this. So of course he has to follow the Torah. And when the steps are laid out, in the Gemara or in a Mishnah in Tractate Yuma, of course it's in order, and the order matters because it's just tracking what it says in the Torah. But if it's not some other thing, like an argument among the sages or an explicit ordering in the Torah, then the order within some list doesn't really matter, is Rav Huna's point of view. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, says the order of the daily offering, described in the Mishnah at the end of Tractate Tamid, on page 33b, is also essential. As it is taught with regard to it, this is the order of the daily offering, indicating that it should be performed in exactly that order. And the other sage, Rav Huna, does not include this Mishnah in his blanket statement because that requirement is merely for the mitzvah. In other words, it is preferable that the offering be sacrificed in that order, but it is not disqualified if one deviates from that order. And Rav Huna's principle excludes the mitzvah of the ritual through which a man whose married brother dies childless, the Yavam, frees his late brother's wife, the Yavama, of her levirate bonds, right? The ceremony of chalitza, so that the man who died childless and leaves a brother and a widow, they need to marry each other. That's yibum, or they can perform chalitza, the chalitza ceremony, and then they go their separate ways. They don't have to get married. They have a choice, but they can't go their separate ways until they perform the chalitza ceremony. So this chalitza ceremony has its own seder, right? Seder means order. We talk about a Passover seder, but the word seder means order, the order of events that you have to do. So there's an order of the chalitza ceremony. As we learned in a Mishnah, the mitzvah of chalitza is performed in this manner. The Yavam and his Yavama come before the court, and the judges of the court offer him advice that is appropriate for him as to whether to enter Yibum or to perform chalitza. As it is stated, and the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. Deuteronomy 25:8. And if they decide to perform chalitza, she says, my brother-in-law refused to establish a name for his brother in Israel. He did not wish to consummate Yibum. That recital is direct from the Torah, Deuteronomy 25:7. And afterward he says, I do not wish to take her, from Deuteronomy 25:8. And they would say these statements in the sacred tongue, in Hebrew. And then the Torah says, his Yavama shall approach him before the elders and remove his shoe from on his foot and spit before him. That's Deuteronomy 25:9. Accordingly, she removes his shoe and she spits before him a quantity of spittle that is visible to the judges. And he shall respond and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of one who had his shoe removed. Deuteronomy 25, verses 9 and 10. And Rav Yehuda says that this is the correct order for the mitzvah of chalitza. She recites the sentence beginning with, my brother-in-law refused, and afterward he recites, I do not wish to take her. Then she removes the shoe and spits and recites, so shall it be done to the man who does not build his brother's house. She says it, right? In the first version, he says that. In the second version, she says it. Sorry. And we discussed it. What is Rav Yehuda teaching us? Why does he switch, who says that statement? Well, this is already stated in the Mishnah, and the answer is this is what Rav Yehuda teaches us. It is a mitzvah to perform chalitza like this, i.e., this is the proper order. But if one switched the order, we have no problem with it. The chalitza is still valid, as the order of the ritual is not essential. And this is also taught in a baraisa. Whether one performed the removal of the shoe before the spitting or the spitting before the removal of the shoe, what she did is done, i.e., the chalitza is valid. And Rav Huna's principle also excludes that which we learned in a Mishnah. In Yoma 71b, the high priest serves, i.e. performs the temple service, wearing 8 garments, and the ordinary priest performs the temple service wearing 4. An ordinary priest performs the temple service in a tunic, in trousers, in a mitre, and in a belt. And the high priest adds another 4 garments beyond those worn by an ordinary priest: the breastplate, the ephod, the robe, and the front plate. The order listed in this Mishnah indicates that the tunic was put on first, right? Is the order of these objects these garments that the high priest wears, is that the order that he needs to put them on, actually don them? Or is it simply a list of things he has to wear that distinguish him from an ordinary priest? And it is taught in Baraisa, from where is it derived that nothing precedes the donning of the trousers when the priest dresses? As it is stated, he shall wear a sacred tunic of linen, and trousers of linen shall be on his flesh. And this indicates that the trousers come first, as they are worn directly on the flesh, proving that the list in the Mishnah is not in accordance with the order in which the priests dressed. And the Gemara asks, but if so, what is the reason the Tana mentions the tunic first? And the Gemara answers, because the verse mentions it first. And the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that the verse mentions it first? Answer, because it covers his entire body, the Torah prefers to mention it first. Okay, that was a little bit of a digression on whether the order that the items in a list are given is very important, or is it just a list of examples? Now we're back to our Mishnah, which listed the types of court-imposed execution, and seems to be indicating that in severity, they go stoning, burning, killing by decapitation, and then strangulation. Right? With stoning being the most severe, not because it's the most painful, but because the body can be disfigured. And strangulation being the least severe, because they put a scarf around your neck, two people pull, okay, you're suffocated, you die, but, the body is not really harmed. You just run out of air. I mean, you die, but the corpse is fairly pristine. Where am I? Oh, yes. Yes. So the Mishnah states the types of the death penalty in descending order of severity: stoning, burning, killing by decapitation, and strangulation. So the Gemara discusses the basis for this order. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Stoning is considered more severe than burning. And remember, stoning means getting thrown off a platform, and if the fall doesn't kill you, then they drop a very large rock on your chest, and that does. That's stoning. Burning is not burning at the stake, like the Romans did to the martyrs, including Rabbi Akiva. Burning, this sounds awful to me, they pour molten lead down your throat. Okay. So where are we? So stoning is considered more severe than burning, as stoning is meted out to one who blasphemes, i.e. one who curses God, and to one who worships idols. For what reason is the severity of these transgressions considered greater than others? Because the transgressor undermines the fundamental tenets of Judaism. The Gemara raises an objection. On the contrary, burning is more severe than stoning, as it is meted out to a priest's daughter who committed adultery, Leviticus 21:9. And for what reason is the severity of this transgression considered greater than others? Because through her sin, she profanes not only herself, but her father as well. And top of page 50a, and the Gemara answers, the rabbis hold that only the married daughter of a priest who committed adultery is singled out from all those who commit adultery for burning, but not one who is betrothed. As a betrothed woman who committed adultery, whether or not she is the daughter of a priest, is executed by stoning, not burning. And since the merciful one singles out a betrothed woman who is not married from all married women who commit adultery to be executed by stoning, conclude from it that stoning is more severe than burning. This discussion will be continued tomorrow, God willing, at the regular time, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Bill, furthermore, first question begins with furthermore. Ray, Yoav's argument that Avner could have aimed for the leg. As you yourself have no doubt been briefed as part of your training, a wound to the limbs is, in addition to being a futile effort in general, also not necessarily non-fatal. Absolutely right. There are major veins and arteries in all four limbs, bullets or blades. The odds of hitting one of those is going to be high, and Yoav certainly knows this as a general. He is, as my Nana of blessed memory would say, so full of it you could smell it from across the room. Very good. Tom, Bill, we make allowance for Yoav's grief and possibly other emotions. We recognize his argument as nonsense, but we have compassion for his temporary madness. Very good. Renee, I had an interview years ago and was asked exactly that. Would I shoot to kill or wound if a gunman was threatening? I hesitated and answered, shoot to kill. Had I answered otherwise, I would not have gotten the job. Wise employer. The hesitation merited a follow-up question. Once I determined the risk, there was no hesitation. Very good. Sharon, but Adonijah declared himself king before David died, which is why Nassan and Bathsheba told King David, who then declared Solomon publicly as his successor. So how did Yoav get considered rebelling against Solomon? It's a great question. Great question. But I think it was pretty clear, because even when they came to David and said, Adonijah has declared himself king. So first of all, we all agree Adonijah had no right to do that. You don't declare yourself king when your father is sitting on the throne. So certainly there was a rebellion against David. But why did they come to David and say Adonijah has declared himself king, raising alarms, right? Was it because, hey, you're still alive and your son is declaring himself king? That's not what they said. What they said is, Adonijah has declared himself king, which contradicts your express intent that you would make Solomon your successor. David had already announced that Solomon would be his successor. And that's why Adonijah rose up and declared himself king before David died, because he knew that once David died, it would be too late. So it was a rebellion, not only against David's wishes, but against Solomon in that sense, is the way that I'm reading it. Good question. Bill, Yoav gives an object lesson of the Latin axiom, corruptio, optima pessimi. I have no Latin, so I'm sure I'm pronouncing it terrible. But corruptio optima pessimi, the corruption of the best is the worst. Here was a generous, pious, honorable man, so honorable that even Avner, his sworn enemy, couldn't even conceive that he would be plotting murder, and yet he ends terribly, precisely because he let his evil inclination get the best of him, right? Those who've reached the greatest heights have the greatest fall. Same concept. Very good. Renee, perfectly pronounced potash. Oh, for that word, potash. Thank you. And Augusto, if dropped, I thought to take you back up and throw you down again from the second story versus dropping a big rock on your head. Not on your head, on your chest. And I didn't know that. I thought they would have dropped you again also. But we just had that a few days ago. That stoning is carried out, right, from a height. The platform is sort of the height of two average people. And then he's standing up on that. So his head is like, 3 times the height of a normal person. They drop him. There's a rock down there that he lands on. And if that doesn't kill him, the witness, right? The witness, with the help, one witness pushes him off the platform, and the other witness, with the help of somebody, if necessary, lifts up this huge rock. I guess it's on a platform then, and drops it on the guy. And they said no one ever survived. Some survived the drop from the platform, but no one ever survived, throwing that first rock on him, or really dropping that first big rock on his chest. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Thursday, regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.